Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the eLearning Champion podcast, where we dive deep into strategies, trends, and triumphs shaping the world of learning and development. In today's episode, we are going to see the power of building trust in leadership. And I'm sure you won't want to miss the insights and expert perspectives we're about to unpack. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker for today, Randy Conley. Hi, Randy.
Hi, Sherna. It's wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you. Randy Conley serves as the Vice President and Trust Practice Leader for Blanchard. He is Blanchard's subject matter expert in trust and is the co author with Ken Blanchard on the book Simple Truths of Leadership: 52 Ways to Be a Servant Leader and Build Trust. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Trust Across America as a top thought leader in trustworthy business behavior and is a founding member of the Alliance of Trustworthy Business Experts. Inc.com recognized him as a top 100 leadership speaker and thinker, and he was included in the American Management Association's Leaders to Watch in 2015. He actively blogs at Leading with Trust. We are glad to have you on board, Randy.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm very thankful for the invitation.
So before we dive in, dear listeners, make sure you are a true e-learning champion by hitting that follow button wherever you're listening in from. So to start off, Randy, why is trust so important for a leader?
Well, I believe trust is the foundation of any healthy, productive, successful relationship, and even
Right.
more so in a leadership context. Because if we expect people to follow us, to give their best energy and effort in what they're doing, they
Right.
absolutely have to trust us. And trust is a two-way street. It has to go both ways. Leaders need to be able to trust their people, and their people need to be able to trust the leader. So it's absolutely essential that we have a high level of trust in our relationships.
Right. Interesting. So what does servant leadership look like in today's organizational structure?
Servant leadership can sometimes be a very polarizing topic. Just
Right.
the word itself conjures up different images. Some people hear the
Correct.
term servant leadership and they think, oh, that's some religious movement, right? Or they think servant leadership, that's letting, the inmates run the prison, which is a
Right.
horrible analogy for work, right? Uh,
Yes.
or they think servant leadership is just, leaders kind of letting people do what they want, leaders being nice and all that. That's not the case. Servant leadership, it's really important to look at the two parts of servant leadership. The first part is a strategic part. That's the leader
Right.
part. And that's setting the vision, the direction, the goals of where the team or the organization is headed.
Correct.
And then the servant part comes in. And that's the operational part where leaders do what they can to serve the needs of their people. They remove roadblocks, they provide resources, they provide training. And so we like to talk about servant leadership is really flipping that traditional organizational pyramid where the leader's at the top and all the employees are at the bottom. We
Right.
flip that upside down to where the leader is now serving, being responsive to the employees.
Right.
So that's what it looks like in organizations. It looks like leaders who are there to help their people be their best.
Interesting. Now, coming to your book, what are some of your favorite simple truths from your book?
Wow. Well, Sherna, that's kind of like asking a parent to pick out which child they love the most, right? Like,
Yes, that's a tough question. I agree.
yeah, it's like you love them all, right? You just love
Right.
them differently.
Right.
So a few of my favorites are one is around trust and control.
Oh,
And the simple truth says the opposite of trust is not distrust. The opposite of trust is control. And
Oh,
so
right.
most people, when they think of trust in a relationship, they think, well, either I have trust or I don't. If I'm not trusting someone, then I must distrust them.
Correct.
Well,
Yes.
the opposite of trust is really control. And here's why. Because for trust to exist in a relationship, someone has to take the risk of first extending trust.
Correct.
And until someone extends trust to the other, you're just at a stalemate. Both people
Right.
are just waiting for the other one to extend trust. And so someone has to let go of control. They have to take that risk and extend trust. And so whenever you feel or sense you don't have trust in a relationship, it's really important to think about the control issue. Am I
Right.
not wanting to give up control and put myself at risk? Is the other person not wanting to let go of control? So I think that's a really powerful, simple truth. The opposite of trust is control.
Right.
Another one of my favorite simple truths is around forgiveness. So when we talked about servant leadership and trust in our book, we also wanted to talk about how do you repair trust if it's been broken?
Correct.
And one of the most critical steps is forgiveness. And so our simple truth says forgiveness is letting go of all hopes for a better past.
Wow. Okay.
Forgiveness is letting go of all hope for a better past. We can't change what happened in the
Right.
past, right? It's done, it's over. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not going to forgive someone because of what they did to me. And so I'm just going to hold on to this unforgiveness and by doing so, I think that's punishing the other person because I'm not granting them my forgiveness.
Right.
Who's the only person that that's hurting? Yourself,
Correct.
right? You're only hurting yourself by not forgiving someone else. And so when you can understand that forgiveness is really all about you, it's not about what the other person does, not about whether they apologize or admit that they were wrong. Forgiveness is all about you.
Correct.
And I think that's a really, really powerful concept that we don't talk about at work, right?
Yes.
I like to joke and say forgiveness is the F word that we don't talk about at work, right?
Right. Yes.
But it's really powerful. So those are a few of my favorite simple truths. There's 50 other ones that we could spend all day talking about, uh, but they're all short little bits of leadership wisdom that really pinpoint what it means to be a high trust servant leader.
Got it. Okay. So, what gets in the way of leaders building trust with others?
Wow. So many things. But I think one of the biggest one is our own ego. Our ego gets in the way.
Yes.
Leaders, it's easy for us to think that we have to be the smartest person in the room, that we
Right.
have to have all the answers, uh, that if we express any doubt or if we admit to our mistakes or admit that we don't know something, then people are going to think less of us.
Right.
And that's not the truth. Actually, when we are willing to admit our mistakes, show some humility, and recognize that we're not, you know, the smartest, best person in the room, that creates a whole different perception on the part of people about how they trust us because they look at the leader and they're like, well, Shirna's just like me. Wow, she makes mistakes. You know,
Right.
she doesn't know everything. She doesn't have all the answers. I can relate to that.
Yes. It's
And so we've
relatable.
Yeah, it's relatable. We've got to get our ego out of the way and just remember that we're people just like everyone else. Leaders are just like everyone else. They have a different set of responsibilities, a
Correct.
different focus of their job, but they're still people. And so I think if we get our ego out of the way, that's a big way to open the doors to building trust.
Right.
Um, I think the other thing that gets in our way is many leaders have this idea of I can't have a friendship with my team members.
Right. Correct.
I have to keep it professional, right? So I
Professional.
can't I can't develop any emotional attachment to my people. I I'm the boss. I'm not their friend. And I think it's possible to be both. I don't think it's an either or situation. I think it can be both and. You are both a leader and a colleague and a friend.
Right.
And there needs to be proper boundaries for each, right? People need to be clear on roles and responsibilities and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But
Yes.
we don't always have to have this distance between us.
Correct.
Um, because the further distance we have, the harder it is to create trust in that relationship. So get our ego out of the way. Don't get hung up on, I can't have a personal relationship with my team members. I think are two big things that get in our way of building trust.
Right. Interesting. Now, speaking of culture, what role does culture play in building
Mm,
trust?
yes, it plays a tremendous role.
Yes.
So we have to be culturally sensitive and culturally aware of
Absolutely.
how what trust looks like in different cultures. And so generally speaking, in um, in Western cultures, we have a few trust cues, things like a firm handshake or
Right.
direct eye contact,
Correct.
um, are signs of, oh, I can trust that person.
Correct.
Whereas in Eastern cultures, it's a little different, right? Maybe a little softer handshake. Maybe eye contact is not as direct.
Correct.
Maybe communication styles are more indirect in communication versus being direct. And so trust looks a little different in different cultures. And we leaders, especially today when most organizations are, working with people from around the globe,
Yes.
we have to understand what trust looks like in those particular cultures. And there's lots of wonderful resources on the internet, that anybody can search and find, how to build trust with, you know, whatever culture you're looking for.
Correct.
So I really encourage people to do that because um, it brings out this important point about trust. Trust is based on perceptions,
Yes.
which are formed by the behaviors we use. And so if I'm working with colleagues in India and I'm expecting them to behave just like my colleagues in the United
United
States,
States. Yes.
it's not going to work, right? I'm going to
Correct.
be looking for all the cues from the US of what trust looks like for us, and that's not what it looks like for
For
folks in India.
them. Yes. Yes.
And so it's really super important to be culturally aware and educated in order to effectively build trust with people from different cultures.
Right. Interesting.
Trust is trust is very contextual and it's
Yes.
situational, right? So um, and even within the same culture, within the same organization, organizations have little micro cultures, right? Like the
Yes.
finance team may have a culture that looks like this. The marketing team, their culture is a little different. The sales team, their culture is really different,
Yes.
and so you have to understand that building trust is very situational and contextual,
Same section.
and
Yes.
adapt your behaviors and your style to meet whatever situation or context that you're in.
Yes, absolutely. So, how can trust be repaired when it's been broken?
Mm, wow. Well, there are very specific steps that we can take to repair trust. Before I share those steps, I think it's important to understand that when we talk about trust being broken,
Broken.
there's a very wide spectrum of what that looks like.
Right.
On the one hand, we've got very minor, unintentional erosion of trust, right? Maybe
Right.
you're a little late for a meeting, you miss a deadline, little things like that. Unintentional, very minor. On the other end of the spectrum, you have things that can be very intentional and very serious.
Correct.
Like you can think of um, fraud or
Correct.
embezzlement from the organization, or violating specific laws and company
Policies.
policies, that
Yes.
right. And for most of us in our everyday interactions at work, those breaches of trust are kind of in the middle and over towards the minor side of the scale, right? It's
Right.
the
Correct.
ones over here on the major side are the exceptions. So when I
Exceptions.
talk about repairing trust, I'm talking about sort of that middle of the road and to the more minor cases.
Yes.
So the very first step that we can take is is to admit and acknowledge that we have a trust gap.
Correct.
So step number one, you have to acknowledge it, because the old, what do ostriches do when they get scared, right? When they're frightened, they stick their head in the ground. They find a little hole and they stick their head in the ground and they act like nothing's around. That doesn't work when it comes to repairing trust. So you have to
Right.
acknowledge that you've had a breach of trust, and you have to pinpoint what are the behaviors, what are the actions that caused that breach of trust.
Right.
Step two is to address the situation. You need to apologize if necessary. If you did something that caused the erosion of trust, own up to it. Apologize for what you did, acknowledge and apologize for the impact that it had on the other person. And then the third step is to put in a plan of action for how are you going to rebuild trust moving forward.
Right.
That's the most critical step, because the trap that many of us fall into is we apologize, we acknowledge, yes, trust has been broken. I apologize. I'm sorry, Sherna. And then we just move on
Move on.
and sort of forget about it, and oftentimes repeat the same behavior that
Right.
caused the trust gap in the first place. So we have to change our behavior moving forward.
Correct.
And so that's really having clear agreements with the other person, clear expectations of what are we going to do differently so that we don't have this same
Repeat.
situation happen again. Yeah. So it's easy to remember by 3 A's. You acknowledge, you apologize,
Apologize.
and then you act differently
Act on
moving
it.
forward. Yeah. So
Interesting.
that
Wow.
can be a helpful process for getting trust back on track.
Yes. The three A's.
The 3 A's. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So, now, when we talk about trust erosion, what are the most common ways that people end up eroding trust?
Wow. Um, it's the My experience has shown that most of the uh, breaks in trust that we have are the accumulation of all these little things that just build up.
Little thing. Right.
Right. So it's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. So
Right.
things like being late, missing deadlines, not doing what we say we're going to do, not following through on commitments, um, being rude or, um, harsh with people, um, not walking the talk. That's a big one. We
Right.
say we say that we say that something's important, but then we don't act that way, or we
Correct.
don't act in alignment with our own values or with the organization's values,
Correct.
or we don't we don't give our best effort. We don't produce our best work that we know we're capable of producing. And it's just these little things that every once in a while on their own, no big deal, right? We all make mistakes. We're human. We
Right.
all do those things sometimes. But it's the repeated instances of that over and over again that it creates the perception. Remember earlier, I said trust is based on
Based on
perceptions,
perception. Yes.
and those perceptions are formed by the behaviors that we use. So those repeated erosions of trust create the perception of like, wow, I can't trust Randy to, meet his deadlines. He's just constantly late.
Right.
And and when we start to feel that way about an individual, it starts to take on a life of its own. And rather than just thinking, oh, Randy has trouble meeting deadlines,
Hmm.
then our mind starts to blow it up out of proportion. We say, oh, well, Randy's not a very ethical person either. He's
Right.
really not very competent in what he does. And then suddenly, I don't trust Randy at all. When really
Correct.
it's just Randy's problem with not meeting deadlines. So we have to really be mindful. Trust um, should be top of mind in all of our interactions, but it's often not.
Right.
When does trust often sort of become top of mind? When it's not there, when it's
When
been
it's not there.
broken.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's sort of like oxygen. We don't really think about oxygen. We just breathe, we
We
take it
just
for
breathe.
granted,
Yes.
right? But wow, if we suddenly can't breathe or we go underwater, we're swimming and we're underwater and suddenly we can't breathe and we feel this need to breathe, it's like wow, oxygen becomes super important, right?
Right.
And that's the same way with trust. We take it for granted until it's been broken, and then suddenly we realize how important it is. So we've really got to stay on guard to keep nurturing and building trust.
Interesting. Wow. Yes. Oh, yes. So that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the eLearning Champion podcast. From simple truths to trust gap, we've covered a lot today. Thank you so much, Randy, for sharing your amazing insights and simple truths that I'm sure a lot of our listeners will connect with.
Thanks, Sharon. It's been a real pleasure to spend some time with you.
Dear listeners, I hope you're walking away with some fresh ideas and actionable steps to build trust in leadership. If you found value in today's conversation, please do share this episode with your fellow peers. Connect with us on your favorite social media platforms. We love hearing from you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the eLearning Champion podcast. Until next time, take care and happy learning.